Good evening. Welcome to the Jewish Museum and this conversation between Ori Gersht and Al Miner. I'm Norman Kleeblatt, I'm Chief Curator here, and I'm pleased to be able to co-host with Artis this conversation between the curator and artist of the latest show on the block of the Eastern Seaboard. This evening is a Strike While the Iron is Hot approach. We've captured both curator and artist just 1 week after the opening of the Ori Gersht History Repeating exhibition, which opened on August 28th at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. The exhibition, Ori Gersht History Repeating, is the first comprehensive survey of Gersht's work. It includes several photographs which have never before been exhibited and is accompanied by a major monograph published by the MFA. With the latest digital technology, Gersht's work poetically revisits sources ranging from 19th century romantic landscape painting to the Holocaust, which imbue his work with a tension between beauty and violence, memory and history. With 25 works, including large-scale photographs and films that date from the late 1990s to the present, Gersht examines the evolving relationship between cultural, political, and art histories. I know that some of you in this room, and I've heard it, have already been to see the exhibition. Others, like myself, are booking reservations, and I know Monday is another event. We at the Jewish Museum have a wonderful history with the artist, and we've admired and collected his work for more than a decade, and it's actually exactly a decade since his first work, Do, came into the collection. We're thrilled that one of the 4 works in our collection, Pomegranate, is currently featured in the MFA show and also in the recent New York Times article about the show and Gersht. Gersht's photograph, Olive 10 from 2004, is upstairs on the 3rd floor galleries and currently on view. So I'm happy to turn the podium over to Yael Reinhardt, Executive Director of Artis, who will tell you a bit more about the forthcoming programs of that organization and formally introduce Ori and Al. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Glad you could make it out on this first official, exciting night of the art world post-Labor Day. And thank you to the Jewish Museum for co-hosting this with us. There couldn't be a better venue to present a talk like this that Al and I spoke about doing, 2 years ago, which in museum land is not a long time, right? So I'm glad we're finally here. So, like Norman said, my name is Yael Reinhardt. I'm the director of Artis, a nonprofit organization based in New York, LA, and Tel Aviv. And we support and promote contemporary Israeli artists internationally. For the last 8 years, Artis has created opportunities for cultural dialogue through our monthly public programs and lecture series. We've supported hundreds of talented artists at pivotal moments in their careers, that's my daughter, through our grant program and professional development initiatives. We've built bridges between the international art world through our semi-annual research trips to Israel, of which Claudia Gould, the new director of this museum, is one, very proudly, over there. And we provide important resources on Israeli art through our website, artiscontemporary.org. So please visit and find out more. Just quickly, a couple of upcoming events. In LA, we're doing a talk with Gilad Rotman, who is the next representative of Israel in the Venice Biennial 2013. Here in New York, we're going to do a talk with the legendary graphic designer David Tartakover, which really should not be missed, so please come. It's in October. We are participating in an art fair in LA called Art Platform LA. And coming soon, next June, we're doing our second collector trip to Israel. So for those of you who want to visit Israel through the lens of art and have the ability to make a contribution, please come and see me and I can tell you more about it. So now about Ori and Al, and then you will hear them speak and see some beautiful work. Ori Gersht received an MA in photography from the Royal College of Art, London, and a BA in photography, film, and video from the University of Westminster, London. Gersht has had numerous solo exhibitions internationally. Most recently, This Storm is What We Call Progress at the Imperial War Museum, Midnight Moment, a large-scale public installation in the heart of Times Square in New York, Lost in Time at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, and Falling Petals at CRG Gallery, New York, in Engels Gallery in Los Angeles, and in Noga Gallery in Tel Aviv. Al Miner is the Assistant Curator of Contemporary Art at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Prior to the MFA in Boston, Miner worked at the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden in Washington, D.C., where he curated major projects and commissions by artists Dan Graham, Yoko Ono, and Blinky Palermo. Miner is the recipient of numerous fellowships and is a practicing artist as well. Please join me in welcoming Ori and Al.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Yael, and of course, thank you to the Jewish Museum for having us. This is our first Dog and Pony show of what will be a, I think, long, exciting series of public appearances. So I hope we're not rusty. I think we'll be great. And it's true that for 2 years we've been talking about this event, and Ori and I have been talking for about that same time about this exhibition that we did and what it would look like and how we would communicate the breadth of his work through events like this, but also through the exhibition to people who either know his work a little because they've seen smaller presentations, thanks, or maybe they're seeing Ori's work for the first time. The slide you see right now behind me is a photograph by Ori called Bookmarks, and I think it's both a pivotal moment in his career, it's a seminal image for him, it represents a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight, but it also, to me, sort of illustrates what the inside of the Ori Gersht brain might look like. Ori has a mind that is constantly working, the gears are always turning, he is extremely well-read, intellectually engaged, but what I love about you, Ori, is how intuitive your process is at the same time. And when I see a piece like Bookmarks, the subtlety of your message is right there. If you guys notice at the top on the left, there's a row of black books with red spines, and the marks are bullet marks because this was shot in Sarajevo. And it was a time for Ori in the late 90s when his career as we know it really began. Now, when we talk about history repeating, what does that mean? I think initially, in terms of our first conversations, I thought there was a fairly straightforward relationship between Ori and the past, which he always engages with. But it very quickly became more of a story of histories, of different times in the past, of different events in the past, of things that have affected him as a person and his own identity, and certainly things that have affected our entire culture. So what we'll do is we'll examine some of those different histories and how they're illustrated by his work. I think that the personal work that you make, Ori, is sometimes the most moving. I think for me and a lot of people, you have an extreme emotional contact to what you're making, particularly in one body of work. And Ori's always engaged with art history, which we'll talk about a little more later, but I bring up this image by Goya to show a kind of counterpoint to what you do, which is to deal sometimes with difficult subject matter, but in a way that is much more indirect. This is another work by you, The Mountain, which is, again, a really important image that sums so much up, and in a way has some of the same subject matter as that Goya print, but you would never know that looking at what seems like a peaceful, almost quiet moment. Will you tell us where this is and how it came to be?
Yes, I just want to say that all the work that I produce, there is always a sort of narrative that contextualize the work, but there is the other side of it is a visual response that almost formal, and I'm using the medium of photography, and photography essentially is always relying on a subject matter that existed in front of the lens. So photography can never depict pure abstraction, and it's a fundamental difference from painting. And in this respect, photography is always somehow attached and rooted to the world that is out there, and for that reason became a significant or very important tool to record history in modern time. So I think that my process and the way I work always, I'm trying to pull the tension, some sort of dialectics between the appearance and the image, and then the narratives that unfold or that contain within this image. And one of the things that interesting me is how I can create this separation and suspense. So when the viewer is actually approaching the image, they have one experience, and slowly, as some knowledge or understanding about the narrative unfold or emerge, how the initial experience start to transform, and how the some sort of relationships that are existing between the pure visual metalingual experience, and then how knowledge and preconception are forming our experiences, and from that moment, this kind of initial formal response can never return or can never regain its purity. So talking about this particular work, this was part of a journey that I did together with Noga Engler, with my wife, to the Carpathian Mountain and to the area of a village called Kosov. Noga's father survived the Holocaust there as a boy, and it wasn't, we didn't worked on this idea to go there for a very long time. It almost came by chance. Actually, was planning to drive to another area of Poland, and to do something that I have in mind. And when I was working on this, we looked at the map, and all of a sudden it occurred to Noga that it was very close to this particular region that all her life she wanted to go one day and visit. And so we decided that we will expand our trip. By chance, when we arrived to Poland, I realized that I forgot my driving license. We were supposed to rent a car and drive, so we changed everything around, and we took a night train from Krakow to Lvov. And this experience really set everything up, and the work started to emerge from there. Noga brought with her a text that her grandfather wrote that she never dared to read in its entirety before. And we met some people around Lvov, and they took us to the area of Kosovo and Kolomia. And every evening we read this document that her grandfather wrote. And based on those readings, we kind of began to explore. And there was a fundamental contrast, because on the one hand, we arrived to this very pastoral village in February, and everything was so tranquil. It looked like a scenery from a painting by Bruegel. But the stories that occurred in this particular place 60 years earlier was horrendous, and part of it was Noga's father, or my father-in-law, as a child, found himself over 2 years hiding in a pit in the ground, like a small grave where he could not even stand in. And I mean, the events were horrendous. Now, something happened there. Of course, when you walk in this landscape, you have one experience. When you read about things that happened there, you walk in this landscape, and all of a sudden the experience of those places shift a great deal. And one of the issues that I had with the camera, with photography, is how do I photograph? Because the camera will always record what is in front of it. So how can I refer to events that happened 60 years earlier when I'm actually existing in or walking in this place in the present? And what I start to do is to follow this kind of a visual approach that I explored. I began to explore 2 years earlier, and I start to overexpose the film to light. And by doing this, the light start to erase the images. and the photographs are still representing those particular places, but they're also almost moving to the realm of abstraction. And I saw it as some sort of fusion between my psychological state that is projecting on the landscape, and then the landscape itself that the lens of the camera is absorbing. And the fusion between those two states, between projecting and absorbing, creating images that are related to reality, but at the same time removed from it. So I'll go back quickly to this image. This is a mountain that they actually, at the beginning of the war, when the Germans arrived to this region, they, together with a group of Ukrainian collaborators, they dug 2 pits that are about 20 meters square each. And then they called the Jewish people that lived in this village to come up, and they accumulated around 2,000, about 50% of the population of the village, and they began to shoot and push them into those pits. And the body fell upon each other. 1 bullet was dedicated for each person. And my father-in-law was on his way up, where with his mom and his brother, where a German officer shouted at them to go back into the house, and their life was saved. And my father-in-law was talking about this for years, about this big mountain. And so when we arrived there, the first thing that Noga wanted to do is to find a mountain, and we went there. It's almost like a hill. It's very small and modest, but obviously this is a memory of a 5-year-old child, and it was interesting to bring back this photograph to him, and it's the first ever evidence he had of this particular memory. And as much as this photograph is abstract, for him it was still an historical document, because it is a photograph and it is relating to a truth.
Well, I mean, that's something I think that's in a lot of your work, Ori, is this idea that a camera doesn't just record the truth, that the decisions you make visually become metaphors for memory, and how memory fails but also, is successful. If we then look at that region and that trip and how important this personal story is for you, we get to the first projected film you ever made, so the first large work, which is called The Forest and was shot in the same area. Now, it's not a completely dissimilar story that's being told, same region, same people, but what in this case, does film give you that photography doesn't? How do you think the choice to use film for this project gives the viewer something else in terms of telling the same story in a new way?
Well, I think that one of the things that you always face with photography is that it's locking the here and now in this eternal frame. And as a viewer, you can never escape this moment. And with my photography, I often try to create photographs that are freeing themselves from the particularity of a place or a time. So the photograph, if a photograph often is very concrete in its evidence and details, many of my photographs are becoming almost ephemeral. They're about these places or moments that it's very difficult for the viewer to grab or to get a tangible grip of. And with the film, it's a very different experience. I mean, cinema is working in exactly the opposite way, where you can never fix a moment, and every frame is constantly slipping away. And what I did with this film, that was actually originally presented in conjunction with the photograph, I tried to make it as sharp and as kind of a concrete, almost tangible as possible. And also the sound, if the photograph always, they are very silent, the sound in this film is very, very rich with a very heavy bass. So the experiences of, as if they're complementing, but also they're kind of reacting against each other. So the sound was traveling from one space into the silence, kind of intruding the silent space of the photographs. And there is something about the film that creates through the relationship between the images and the passage of time and sound, that it creates I think a very different emotional experience.
I want to play a clip so that people can sort of get a sense of what this is like. And sound is something that is so important to you, but in this piece, the sound sort of reaches a crescendo, and that's something you then explore in other films. But let's experience the crescendo together. Loudly. All right, that wasn't that loud. I'll give you loud later.
It is louder.
Nah, we're gonna spare the ears for now. Now, I want to show a different video right away that, again, deals with the subject of the Holocaust. It is emotional, but not necessarily. It's a bit of a departure because this isn't based directly on your own family's experiences or someone who you have a very close relationship with. And it's one of the few instances, really, where you bring the human figure and the face into your work. This is Ori's most recent dual-channel piece called Will You Dance For Me? So here we're meeting a character who isn't necessarily someone you know well. Her name doesn't appear in the title, but I think that instantly as viewers we can connect to her. There's some sort of emotional connection. And that to me comes a lot from not only just her face and the story of the many years she's lived told in that visual way, but very much in the way you pair her with the landscape and you move her in and out of the darkness. Do you want to tell us a little about who she is and how you came to find her?
Yes, I just want to say that the first few images that were brought up here, they're all kind of somehow related to the Holocaust or to the Second World War, and obviously there is a biographical relationship that I have to those events, but my interest in the work that I'm trying to produce whenever the work is related to those events, I'm hoping is much more open and universal rather than about the specificity of those events. I kind of, part of me feels that what happened during the Second World War were fundamental experiences that really shaped the world that we live in today. I mean, if you think about the nuclear bomb as an example, but also the way, you know, after the war, the world became much more pluralistic than ever before. There were the level of atrocities that kind of unheard of in Western society should always kind of be remembered and carried in our consciousness as some sort of a moral barometer. And I kind of think that it's somehow the work is relating to the past, but for me it's much more about this present and about the significance of those of holding on, and it's one of my interests to work with the medium of photography, is an attempt to hold on to memories, because we are now living in a time that that very soon the first generation or the people that live through those experiences will pass away, and with them there is this great danger that those memories will pass away, and then without holding on to those, there is a great risk of losing something fundamental about our kind of a morality. So I feel a level of responsibility, and at the same time I'm constantly surrendering, and it's relating in many ways to what this film is about. I feel constantly that I have to surrender to the fact that the passage of time will always fade those memories, and one have to accept this. A lot of my work is about this attempt to hold on to something that simultaneously I feel is already gone. So this film, it's about a dancer named Judith Arnon, and she did survive Auschwitz, and she was forced by the Germans to dance for them in a Christmas party. When she refused, they punished her for a long time, as she explained in the monologue at the beginning of the film. And then she decided to dedicate, after surviving her life, to dance. And now she's in very ill health. And the film was actually some sort of a performance where she's dancing for maybe the last time.
Yeah.
And because physically she was restricted, she was dancing in a rocking chair. So she's constantly moving between darkness and reappearing in light. So there is kind of she's submerging. I was imagining the light being some sort of a surface that she will try to come out of and being soaked by. And constantly she's about to disappear and then re-emerging, and there is kind of tension that exists between something that is almost going but constantly have this vitality and desire to come back. And when I start to work with Judith, it was I talked to her about this idea, and she really wanted to do it, but I said that I would like to return and film it in 5 months, and she said that she hopes that things will be okay, because 5 months is a long time. And actually, in the period between me going away and coming back, she had an accident and she was in a very bad state, so we postponed everything. She never came back to what she was before, but somehow it was important for her to do it, so we flew over to Israel very quickly, and we set the entire scenario in a large studio that she initiated and built in the kibbutz for the dance theater that she created, which I felt was the most appropriate place to film it. She was only able to come for a couple of hours and sit in the chair, so everything had to be very focused and prepared for her. And as I began to work, I realized that she wasn't very happy with what we were doing, and I asked her why. And she choreographed this whole scene, and she wanted the space to express it. So we decided to do one take where we just let her do whatever she wanted in front of the camera, and it ended up being a 30-minute take that the central part of the film is actually about her dancing, and the camera is just following her, and at a point the chair doesn't rock any longer. She just sits in the chair, and the movements are very restricted. She's mainly dancing with her head and with her expression, but I think that all the crew that was standing on the set around this time, we found it a very a profound and kind of a moving experience that, and for me a great privilege that she kind of was willing to be so bold, and also a will to express herself in such way in front of the camera.
Yeah, she's extremely expressive, and I think we instantly feel a connection to her. You talked about going to where Noga's father was from to shoot The Mountain. We've talked about running really fast from your home in London to Israel to shoot that project, but you've been making these sort of journeys for a long time, trips that are as direct as in this photograph, which was shot on the side of the highway between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and also is much more complicated. These are some shots of Ori filming those two pieces we just saw, Will You Dance For Me, and the forest. So you're often out in the world working. This is one of the examples that you were mentioning earlier of the blurring technique and how this movement might be captured on film and how time is fleeting, but the camera can still tell that story. And this was shot out the window of a train, right?
Yes.
Between Krakow and Auschwitz. But for certain pieces, you've really, I think, made the journey as much a part of the work as anything else. We're showing this image right now, very famous painting by Caspar David Friedrich, the German Romantic painter, because it has a great parallel to one of your other well-known film projects, which is called Evaders. This is a still photograph from that same series. And here we don't quite have a wanderer among the sea of fog, but we do have someone making a journey. And this piece, this drawing, also appears in the film. And it begins with a description of the work, but I think we should get to it and then talk a little bit about your journey to this place and retracing somebody's steps abstractly. So that's a scene from another dual-channel piece, Evaders, for which you really I'm gonna say basically retrace the steps of Walter Benjamin, the famed German Jewish intellectual, as he tried to escape from Nazi-occupied France into Spain and unfortunately was detained and we believe committed suicide. I'd like to hear from you about what the physical experience is like, why you felt to make a piece about Benjamin you had to go to that place.
Well, the journey was tracing the route that Walter Benjamin followed, but I don't see this film about Walter Benjamin. I see this film, I see it more openly. And for a long time, there was this border between Spain and France on the Lower Pyrenees near the Mediterranean. And this border was known as the border between life and death. And apart from Benjamin, there were many other political dissidents during Second World War that tried to escape and use these routes. There was an American journalist called Varian Fry, who also known as the American Schindler, and he managed to get fundings and help 400 more people to use the same route in order to escape the Germans. But it's also important to remember that many Spanish people on the left side of the spectrum tried to escape across the same border while running away from Franco. And many people died over this border. It was interesting when I was crossing it for the first time that still on the border post there were photographs of ETA terrorists that use this border because this territory is very close to the Basque Country. And those both sides of the border, although dividing between France and Spain, both are part of Catalonia. And people on both sides see themselves as this territory is a unified territory. And one of the things that I found very interesting is that now the border is deserted since the common market was formed. So these borders now, they do not exist anymore. So essentially the journeys that we're doing, or this sort of expedition, was ludicrous because we were trying to cross a border that doesn't exist anymore. And I think that in many ways the work is exploring these relationship between culture and nature, and often my work is looking at those ideas, the arbitrary nature of borders, the way territory is divided. I was also interested in relation to Benjamin. One of the things that I found fascinating is that it's the paintings that I'll just show, the Paul Klee paintings that currently in the collection of the Israel Museum, was Walter Benjamin's favorite painting. And he kept hold on to it. It was his last possession, and he tried to sell it just when he was desperate to get his visa to the United States. And he described this painting, this Angelus Novus, he described it as the angel of history. And he looked at it as this kind of messianic figure who was looking at looking back into the past and see all the destruction. And all the angel want to do is go back and repair them and resurrect all the dead. But there is this violent wind that blowing into his wing and pulling them wide open and pushing him backward into the future. And this wind is what we call progress. So he talks about a dialectical scenario where if this angel is, I would think about this angel as the kind of a messianic figure who want to resurrect the dead. But there is this materialistic or view of histories that we constantly move into progress, and this progress is pushing the angel. There is a kind of in his description, there is this kind of collisions that exist between the end of time, the return of the Messiah, and this kind of materialistic historical progress that is constantly moving in a linear direction toward a clear future. And I was interested in creating a journey where the figure in the film is constantly walking, battling with the elements that constantly, like in the painting, try to push him back and hold on to him. And the figure is kind of trying to battle and move forward into a different place across this border. And visually, one of the dialects that I was trying to create, and this was actually thinking about many of the European intellectuals, including Stefan Zweig, Benjamin, and others, that were so attached to the European heritage and to the German heritage that without this, they didn't have any orientation in the world. And for that reason, either didn't live and died, or left like Zweig and committed suicide because they couldn't survive in Brazil or in another place. I tried to shoot this film, and you showed before the image of David Caspar Friedrich. I tried to shoot this film as if it's a part of some sort of German romantic landscape. But the geography of the film is actually in the Mediterranean. It's the Lower Pyrenees. So there is a kind of a real mismatch. And almost I try to kind of create a visual illusion of displacement, that the place appeared to be what it's not. And as if this German romantic landscape is becoming the force that is holding back to the figure, as if the figure is trying to move out of this landscape, and those landscapes are somehow suffocating him or pulling him back in. So it's a mixture of things. So there are relationship to Benjamin, there are relationship to Paul Klee, there are relationship to this idea of borders and the arbitrary nature of borders, and there is kind of this almost this elusive appearance of some things that the viewer believes. The viewer tend to believe that they see one thing, or they're looking at the, for example, German romantic landscape, but they're actually in a completely different place, and those kind of tension or deceptions that appear in the way the camera is depicting the world that is in front of
I mean,
me.
that definitely brings us to the role of political borders in your work generally, and the kind of photographs and films that you've made depicting the borders that you grew up near in Israel. I'm showing a very famous Robert Capa photo, which at the time was shocking, and I think really still is, of somebody at the exact moment of being shot during war. Now, you choose to engage with violence, but in a completely subversive way, bringing us there not through graphic depictions, but through a more subtle and often beautiful story. Neither Black Nor White, Ori's first film, is also related to this pair of photographs, gorgeous photographs called White Light, Red City, which were filmed and shot like physically on an important border. Do you want to talk about it?
Well, I think these works are very much related to evaders. There was a period in 2001 where I was climbing in Israel onto high vantage points, and I was photographing the landscape in front of me, and often, or almost without exception, the landscape included some villages, and all these villages are Arabic villages. There was a period that Ariel Sharon was encouraging the build-up of Jewish settlement in the Galilee on top of mountains in order to break some of the Arab continuity. There is a kind of a lot of strategic tension of where settlements are being built and created. So in many ways, there are this work for me bringing or raising ideas about borders, about the relationship between the land and or nature and culture. Now, the borders in these photographs is never explicit, although there is a sense of some sort of explosion in the vibrancy of the color. But it is about some sort of division. So I'm always taking the photograph from one vantage point that is essentially an Israeli position, because I was always on top of the mountain and always looking at another place or at the other that is often in the valley.
I want to talk a little bit about another kind of border, a border that the rest of us might not think is such a close line, but for you, beauty and violence are very much intrinsically linked, and that line between them is very, very thin. We're going to show a clip. This one better be loud. Yeah, good. So that's a big statement. But it is this incredible image of simultaneous, beauty and violence, of creation and destruction. And the title of the piece is Big Bang, which, says it right there. What is it for you about beauty and violence that you've always seen throughout your life and throughout your work that link them so immediately and make them so dependent one to the other?
I think that it has to be with a fundamental dialectics that we experience in every minute of our life. I remember once a friend of mine, his father survived Auschwitz, and he told me how his father talked about the immaculate, aesthetic of the uniform, for example, and how without the moment we use some sort of affinity to beauty, it's almost as if we're turning off the lights. And also this kind of, I'm looking at beauty often as a deceptive force that make us forget. In the film of the forest, I was constantly trying to create this tension. The camera is moving almost in a mechanical pace across the forest, and everything is very Arcadian. And as a viewer, I was hoping that some kind of the film is very immersive, and the viewer can almost kind of get lost in this tranquil experience, and out of nowhere a tree falls, and when the tree falls, it becomes a very shocking, traumatic, and dramatic experience. But since the camera never celebrates this moment, the camera constantly moving across, this moment is very quickly being forgotten. And once again, physically, we are in this Arcadian space. And what interests me in a film like this, in relation to a similar tension, that after the explosion, there are a downpour of all these color petals that last maybe 3 or 4 minutes and become almost, it's mesmerizing. And how quickly the silence and mesmerizing beauty can make us forget what we actually looked at a minute earlier. And how these transitions are happening actually all the time. We can see something horrific that happened in Afghanistan live that is coming us on the news, and quickly after we are in Seinfeld. And those transitions are occurring so quick, and now emotionally we're making a connection and feeling a strong, we totally investing ourselves in one moment, and how the manipulative power of the visual image can make this transition really becoming so deceptive. And there is something, an element about it that I found incomprehensible, and I'm constantly want to come back to this, and also to create for the viewer those deceptions, and to that the recognition of them may bring a real discomfort.
Now that piece was based on a painting, and a lot of your work is actually based on very traditional, mostly still life painting. And it's interesting, I think, to look at a work like this by Monet. We all understand this work, feel familiar with it. And then to look at a photograph that you've made, in this case, Boatman, which I've now seen many people interact with this piece in person, and they all are convinced it's a painting. And painting has been so important for you, though you've never chosen to work with paint itself. This is another one of your favorites. Do you want to talk a little bit about painting and your engagement with art history, and how you're bringing together sort of new technology with a very old type of art making, and also using this as another metaphor for that beauty and violence?
Yeah, I think that, well, first, all the formal and aesthetic foundation for everything that I do using photography or film was, I believe, was the entire foundation was set during the Renaissance, and possibly with these ideas that Alberti brought about monocular perspective, and how to create an illusion of a three-dimensional space on a flat canvas. And these very same ideas were later used in the design of lenses and the way photography is working. And part of me feels that these ideas are part of a an ongoing desire to come much closer to the representation of the world that is out there.
This
That,
is Ori's version, by the way, of that piece.
So we constantly, Painter were trying to represent a much more realistic, or whatever we define as reality, but realistic of the world that exists out there, and constantly they were looking for various methods and devices that will allow them to do this. So after the invention of the monocular perspective, the mathematical perspective, later Painter came across the concave mirrors that will allow them to project images and create a much clearer depiction of the world. And then the lenses came, and there were optical devices that are improved and allowed Painter to paint much in a more realistic way. And then photography was invented, and all photography did is allowed these images that optically were technically
This
the
also
optical
inspired that piece.
technically the optical devices were invented long time ago. What photography did is just invented a method to fix those images, because the chemistry was just invented. This is the new ideas that was brought by photography. So in many ways, the photograph was just an invention and a continuation of the same tradition. And every photograph that I do, I kind of feel that it's always related to the history and foundations that were set during the Renaissance. One of the things that interests me about those films that I was making is I also believe that technology is not just helping us to represent the world that is out there, but it's also defining the way we perceive the world. So if you think about the film like The Pomegranate, it depicts a moment that old master painters like Juan Sanchez Cotan couldn't even comprehend, because the technology did not exist. The film was shot at an incredible frame rate of 1600 frames per second. And because of this high frame rate, we can see a bullet that is traveling in the air and actually penetrating the pomegranate. In the 17th or 18th century, this technology did not exist, and therefore the painter was unable to depict those moments, but even to think about them as possibilities. So what I'm attempting to achieve in those still life film is, on the one hand, to create images that are very much related to the history of painting, but also depict moments that were incomprehensible by old masters. And the method that I'm producing them is also very different from the tradition of painting.
What you're seeing on the screen right now is a photograph. It's actually 8 feet tall, so it very much deals with that concept of painting as a starting off point. But your process is clearly very different than the painters. This is Ori filming that piece, Blow Up, and that we just saw, and dealing with some really advanced digital technology. I mean, it's, in a lot of ways, it's sort of the opposite of what these painters had to use. I'm going to show a detail of just how high the resolution is in terms of the photographic effects you're able to achieve. But we've had a lot of conversations as well about the other side of digital photography. What you're seeing now is one of the first ever color photographs taken in the early 1900s by essentially the inventors of both color photography and of moving image film. And when we look at an old photo like this, we all think it's old because it's so grainy and so pixelated. But this is a fairly new photograph that Ori has made that is the polar opposite of these hyper-sharp images of flowers and the pomegranate. Do you want to tell a little bit about the breakdown of digital technology as opposed to sort of
Well, this
the
photograph
goals?
was produced in Japan, and it was part of a series of cherry blossoms that I was photographing. And I was attracted to the cherry blossom to start with. I was interested to go to Hiroshima and to photograph those trees that were planted after the war. And on the one hand, the characterized by those very soft pastel colors. But then the realization that those trees are feeding off the contaminated soil, the contaminated nuclear soil, and the tension that exists between those, this knowledge and the visual appearance of these trees was something that I was interested in. As I developed the work, I also realized that the cherry blossom was often used during Second World War as some sort of a symbol for the kamikaze pilot. And the Japanese created a strong analogy, or part of the ideological discourse that was developed was this comparing the ephemeral nature of the petals that are falling at their prime to the fall of the kamikaze pilot. So the whole work was about those relationship between images that are, on the one end, almost ephemeral and very soft, and on the other end, having those kind of strong association to events that happened during the war. Now, relating to the images that are breaking down, in the blow-up photograph, I created those massive images, and my desire was to create images that will be so sharp that will depict details that even the naked eye can no longer process. So the images themselves are almost presenting the subject in an hyperreal way. When I started to work on those cherry blossom, I was mainly working with digital camera, and one of the things that interests me about this camera is that as the technology was introduced, this camera was promoting itself as a device that can actually photograph almost at any light condition. A camera that can work at absolute darkness, at sensitivities that was incomprehensible to me up to that time, at about 25,000 ASA. And it always interests me to take the technology and actually to work on its threshold, at a point that I am trying to push the technology or the camera to do things that it can no longer do. And at this point, the image either fall apart or still all together. So I went in the middle of the night and I began to take those photographs of the cherry blossom. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning at this particular ISO, at 25,000 ASO. And at this point, what starts to happen is that there is always some light, and this light is traveling through the lens. When it arrives to the sensor of the camera, the sensor doesn't have enough information to process the image that or the light that hit it, and as a result, the image starts to fall apart. My desire was not to create images that look impressionistic or look like the original color autochromes. I was trying to just push the camera to a point where it started to alter and divert the way reality is recorded. And there was no manipulation in these photographs. They were just taken in a very direct manner. But what tend to happen because of the battle of the available light and the ability of the sensor of the camera to process the information is that we get those images that start to actually melt down or break down almost to their atomic particles.
I want to go ahead a little bit too, and that brings us to something. I mean, you're always interested in truth and in photographic truth and in what's happened before, but that books have failed to record, or as people pass away, we as a culture lose that sort of collective memory. This is shot in a Vader's, and as you can see in the middle, there's a little black satchel, which represents the last manuscript that some say Walter Benjamin had with him when he tried to escape, but others claim is not true. In photos like, let's look at that one, Green Swamp, somewhat related to the forest and to the mountain, these are really anonymous places, essentially. And for you, I'm going to go on a limb and say that, it's the camera's ability to make this solid or to give memory back to people that you can, really play up in places where important things did happen and we have forgotten. But at the same time, the camera becomes this tool to convey how memory works and fails simultaneously. Do you want to talk about Green Swamp? No, we don't have enough time. I want to show one last film, and then I think we should do questions. You have a brand new film, which I'm happy to say you made for me. Okay, he made it for my museum, but I'm going to act like he made it for me. And what we did at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston was say to Ori, we know how interested you are in art history. Go at it. Look at our entire collection. Meet any curator you want. Go into any storage area you want. And select something, anything, to base a new film on, based on our collection. And this is what you chose, which I think really surprised a lot of us. We were all expecting probably a European painting, maybe something from photographic history. But this is an ancient Greek coin. That's Eupheidemos II. I'm now like a part-time coin dork, which is not the case when I started. And I know when we had conversations about trying to pick which coin out of the thousands of options, you were very much looking for one of a real person and what we could do to that real person in terms of using video and using film. Do you want to talk a little bit about it, and then I'm going to roll it?
Yes. I knew that when I was invited to make a film for the museum, and the film had to relate to work from the collection, that I had this kind of thought that I would like to work with an extreme heat, something that is close, or if possible, with a nuclear heat. I was interested in this force that is so powerful that is destroying, but essentially it's also a force that is creating. I mean, thinking about a nuclear destruction, it's a force that is simultaneously is the force of creation and destruction at the same time. So I wanted to destroy something with it in such a speed that will transform the material from a solid state into liquid and then into gas, to make the object almost evaporate, and if played in reverse, created. So it go from something that from gas turn into solid. And I start to kind of explore those possibilities. And I was going to various nuclear reactors and talking to some scientists. And constantly I faced various obstacles and difficulties in the process. And I was also looking at some solar furnaces where solar energy or heat are used in order to create energy. And simultaneously I was thinking about the object from the museum that I will use. Part of me was conceiving this process as an kind of alchemical cycle. So I was imagining working with metal and starting with nothing or with liquid and slowly creating a noble metal or something that will become, will look like gold. And after a very long journey, I came to the coin. And one of the things that interested me and attracted me to the coin is first the scale that was manageable to work with the amount of it that I wanted to and the speed that I was trying to achieve. And another thing that I found very interesting is that this is an ancient Greek coin. It's about 2,500 years old. And these are the first ever coins to be produced and the first time that society created an object that can be exchanged for commodity. And since this invention, coins haven't changed at all. For 2,500 years, they never change in scale. The portraits, the perspectives, the dimension, the proportion of the portrait haven't changed at all. Always kings are represented on coins, and there is even an issue with the American presidents that are now appearing on coins that for many years they didn't, partly because the United States wanted to differentiate itself from for the United Kingdom, but also it has to do with dynasty and royalty. And so this coin is very, very similar to the UK coins and with the portrait of Queen Elizabeth. Another thing that interests me about this is that now at the end of those 2,500 years, we're almost coming to the end of a cycle, and there is a a very high chance that very soon coin will be phased out of the economy, and most transactions are turning to be abstract using cards and internet and so on. So it's this critical moment where, and I think in this respect, very similar to many of my photographs, it's an attempt to hold on to something that is already gone or that is about to fade away. And what I try to do in this film is to record the process. It is very simple, just the coin is melted. But the film is playing it from the end to the beginning. So it starts with this untrained material that is moving around in a very chaotic order, and slowly out of it form is emerging. And somehow I see it as a collision between, once again, culture and nature, and this cultural desire to train the material and to stamp a human portrait on it. And so the film is exploring those ideas, but I suppose that the main experience that come across is a very visceral and sensual experience of this object that is constantly moving around, and there are those portraits that are somehow emerging and submerging in it, and I suppose when somebody stands in front of it, the main task is to figure out what exactly is going on and being immersed in this kind of
These are some fun images of Ori making the piece. He claims that the one with the heat gun was not set up. I don't believe that. But I'm going to let you see a little bit of the film because it really is quite mesmerizing. So again, an image of things coming in and out of view, of memory fading and coming back, of a person and a place and a thing that's no longer solid. I think we should take questions. I think they want to talk to you.
Okay.
Anybody?
I'm interested in what you're saying about how you're using these technologies like the high-speed cameras and so forth. And obviously, you need to get consultation with other people. I mean, you can see that some of them were in the studio with you. Do you have the idea and then go out looking for the technology that can help you realize the idea, or do you know about the technology and start matching it up with ideas later?
They form one another. It's a very open process, and I think that the MFA really witness it in the process of making this film. They felt the pressure because about 2 years ago they asked me to make a film, and I had some sort of idea what I would like to do. But the idea that I had initially was very impractical. So I started to explore it and figure out how I'm going to do it, and constantly realize why this avenue is not an option, and another avenue opens up. And I keep taking this road, and in the process I read more, I make a lot of experiments in the studio, on location. In the process of making this film, I went to MIT and talked to some scientists there, then went to France to work on a solar furnace and doing some experimentation with them there. And somehow clarity is emerging. And it's a clarity that is partly to do with the conceptual integrity of what I'm trying to do, of the visual language, and of the technologies that is available. So it's never a very direct route where I have an idea and I go and make it. And I think that it's fundamentally different maybe between illustrating an idea and trying to somehow go through an experience that the work is emerging out of.
I will say that this experience of working on a commission with an artist is never pleasant for a curator. It's exciting, but unpleasant. And I definitely got at least one ulcer. Meanwhile, I was getting phone calls from the Pyrenees, like, I'm at the solar furnace, and we don't think it's going to work. I'm like, okay. But on the flip side, I mean, having the experience of seeing your process, of watching you have these moments of discovery, of also, I think, seeing you like a kid in a candy store. You don't get to go with an artist to an actual functioning nuclear reactor very often. So that was a really great experience. But it really is, the process is so much about give and take and about evolution. And, you know, from the curator perspective, you kind of just have to, like, take a chill pill, drink something, whatever works for you, and watch as this process unfolds that isn't predictable and that isn't set up ahead of time. Somebody over there had a hand? Go ahead.
I have a question about, first of all, I admire your work. I have one of your pieces from the Ukraine series, but the one that always really struck me in a very visceral way is the ones, the olive trees, which the museum
Beautiful. I'll send a
there's
picture back.
overexposure there. And while you explained in the Ukraine series you did that as well, I suspect you were trying to achieve something different. And the earlier one was with the olive trees. And the olive trees been an icon in many photographers, Israeli photographers. So I thought maybe you could speak a little bit about that.
Essentially, what I wanted to do with the olive tree photography is to destroy the film with light. I wanted to create an act of violence, but not in the subject that I described, but in the process that actually but in the process itself. So I went in the summer, in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the day, where the sun was incredibly bright in Israel, in Palestinian villages. And I just opened the aperture of the camera and left it to the light. So more and more light were pouring onto the film. And essentially, I didn't know what I was doing and what to expect. Then I processed those films and I got a very dense black negatives. I couldn't see anything through them. And I took these negatives to the darkroom and I tried to print images out of them. And they're very long exposures, again, to get anything onto the photographic paper. And these are the images that came out. And later, initially it was a very kind of simple idea of creating a tension between light that will destroy the film. Later, I kind of realized that what began to happen is something that for me is very interesting, and it's as light traveled onto the film, it registered information. And because I left the aperture open for a very long period of time, more light traveled onto the film. And the light that came on top, what it did, it erased the information. But the way it erased the information is by registration of new information on top. So it's constant process, dialectical process of recalling and erasing. And the image is an amalgamation of all these, I would say, memories of that were accumulated by the film over time. And this kind of relationship to, on the one end, where photography is recalling history and fixing history, and the same token, there is this kind of those images representing the subjective nature of memory and accumulation of a lot of information that creating at the end a unified image. But this unified image is not made out of a particular incident, but of those tension between remembering and forgetting, those dialectical relationships. So I kind of, today I think about these images more in this term. I'm also interested in the difference that occur between those images that they were very straightforward. All I did was click with the camera, but they are also so different from my mundane experience of those trees. So when I was looking at the trees, and when the camera looked at those trees, at the time I was feeling, oh, we're having a similar experience, but the outcome is so different. And it's raised for me a question of what is truth, how reality is recorded, what relationship a camera that supposedly is an objective instrument as to the world that is out there, and or to, I would say, something like an absolute truth.
Another question? Go ahead.
We love your work and collective. What contemporary photographers do you admire, as well as photographers from the 30s and 40s?
Sorry, what?
What photographers are you looking at or that you admire either today or in the past?
Now I look more, I suppose, fundamentally into paintings more than photography. But when you ask me about photographers that I admired, I would say photographers like Eugenia Jett from 19th century, and Joseph Zutag I like very much, and from contemporary practitioners I love the work of Hiroshi Sugimoto, and I think the work of Andreas Gursky is incredible, and I don't know.
It's so funny because all of those people relate to your work in a different way. Like you took Hiroshi's exposures, which is cool, and then you borrowed Gursky's super high tech, and Sudek is, for me, a very dramatic parallel in your work. There's something about the moodiness of his black and white photographs that really relates to your work. Sure. Questions? We'll go there first.
What painters? The most obvious but incredible is Goya for me, and the black paintings in particularly are moving beyond belief. I love the work of Lucas Cranach, Zurbaran, Cotan. I mean, the list is very, very long. There are many painters that, yeah.
Do we want to do one more question? Or we don't have to. That's okay. Ah, a good sport. Go ahead.
Well, this is not a question as much as an observation.
Sure.
I think you have rediscovered a principle in psychology and memory, which has been kind of forgotten. And it was discovered in the 1920s, and it's called the Zeigarnik effect. And what the Zeigarnik effect is named after a person named Bella Zeigarnik. And she discovered that incomplete tasks, incomplete activities are recalled better than complete ones. And I think your genre is kind of testimony to that kind of effect.
And on that, we will all go home and Google it. I will, for sure, on my phone in a cab on the way back. But thank you, all of you, so much for coming. It's been quite a treat, and thanks.
Thank you very much.